Right. Hi, my name is Mira, and today I'm going to be presenting an introduction to Git and Bitbucket as part of this Data Science for Social Impact short course. Just as a heads up, this is going to be going back and forth between a presentation and then kind of a demo, because a lot of the presentation is actually more of a set of instructions for getting everything set up. So with that being said, let's jump into it. So what exactly is Git? Git is a free and open source distributed version control system. And all that really means is that all of the code and revision history for a project is mirrored on every single computer that has access to where that information is hosted. So it isn't centralized. Everyone has their own copy of everybody else's work and what all the work that's been done on it. And working in this way and using Git enables content tracking and storage, which is in a repository. We'll talk a little bit more about that in a minute. Easy collaboration between people, and results in code that can be added and edited, or content that can be added and edited by anybody at any time without losing other work that people have done on the project. So there are two main repository services. There's Bitbucket, which is from Atlassian, and that's the one that we'll be using. And then there's also GitHub, which is probably more popular, and that comes from Microsoft. So I'm going to briefly go over how Git version control actually works. So each developer has a remote repository, which is hosted on Bitbucket or GitHub. And then they also have a local repository, which is what is on your personal computer. So we can think about it as kind of this branching structure here. So this light blue, we could call the main or the master branch, which is centralized. All of the code that gets worked on individually will eventually be pushed or merged to that branch. And then you also have an individual branch. So those are going to be your edits to the project. So in this case, it's the green down here. And in your individual branch, the work on your local repository should be in that branch, and that's work that you can push to your remote repository and then merge with the main branch. So that's kind of pulling down work from the main branch here, working on it in your individual branch, and then pushing it back up and merging it with the main branch. This is all done via a set of commands that are specific to Git, and you use those commands in the terminal to update your local repo, update your remote repo with your work and with work that other people have done. So there are a couple things that we have to do in order to actually get started with Bitbucket. A lot of this is one-time setup. So before you start or even join a project, you have to create a Bitbucket account. If you're doing things locally on your desktop, you should install a Git client. I use Git Bash. Then, once you get that done in the terminal, you have to link your Bitbucket account with Git. So what I'm going to do is actually go into my RStudio server that I have up here, because you can access the terminal from the RStudio server if you're working remotely or if you don't want to use the terminal on your desktop. And kind of just show you how to set up these configuration commands to set up your Bitbucket username and then your Bitbucket email. So the first thing I'm going to do actually is just copy this. There we go. And then we're going to paste as plain text. Control-C and Control-V don't work particularly well in the terminal, so we have to kind of use point and click commands. And then my username is not username, so we're going to type in MMR125, which is just, I made it my case ID. Enter. And then if we go back here, I'm going to copy this other configuration command and paste that in as well. And then this should be your case email if you're if you're set up through the class. All right. Yep, that looks great. So this might prompt you to sign in and use your password. The little window might come up to put in your password for Bitbucket. I'm already signed in, so that did not happen for me, but just so you're aware, that might be part of the setup process for this. All right, and then for each project that you're working on, we have to do a few more steps. So we're going to go into Bitbucket next and kind of do some of these little administrative things that we should do before we actually get to looking at the repo and putting it onto your own local repository. So I mocked up this little Antarctica penguins climate data folder, which just has a bunch of information that we're actually not really going to look at. The first thing that we have to do before we can access this is we have to set up an app password. So that basically lets Bitbucket access your Git client so that everything is secure. So up here, once you're signed in, it has your profile, and then settings. We want to go to personal Bitbucket settings. Excuse me. And we want to go over here to app passwords. So we're just going to make a new one so I can show you how that works. You can label it whatever you want. I'm going to call this demo. Demo. And you basically want to give it, I just give it all write permission because it's easy and I don't have to deal with it later. But this is basically saying, okay, I'm giving permission for whatever I'm using this password for to write all of these different, possible parts of a repo. I'm actually gonna give myself admin and delete permission for the repository too. So hit create, and it gives you this, nonsense that you can't possibly memorize and is not catchy at all. So what you're gonna do is you need to copy this somewhere. So I'm gonna copy it and I'm gonna put it in a sticky note actually. There we go. Right. And paste that there. So that's important. That's gonna come back later. All right. We can close that. All right. So now that that's good, we can go back to our repo. So I'm gonna go back to my Penguins repo. And the next thing we need to do is create a branch. So like I said before, that is where you should do all of your work. We don't want to work directly on the main branch most of the time because that could mess up some other work that someone's already done. You could be trying to change the same file at the same time as someone else, which causes a whole host of problems. So we really, really want to do work in our own branch. So I can go over here to branches, and you can see there's only the main branch right now, and I'm going to create a branch, and I'm just going to give it my name so other people know whose branch it is, and the 3 letters of my case ID. And there we go. We can see I have nothing in my branch right now. We go back to branches and hit all. You can see it's just my branch and main. And right now I am 0 commits behind the main and also 0 commits ahead of main. And that's important. We'll talk about that in a minute. All right, so now that we've done that, we have done a bunch of administrative stuff in Bitbucket and we made a branch for the repo. Now we need to actually clone the repo to our local repository, which is in this, our studio server, this file structure that's in here. So we have to go here. I'm going to go back to source. And we want to hit clone. So some people might have an SSH key set up. That can be really helpful. If you have that set up, great. You don't have to enter a password or worry about entering that app password ever again. You can just copy the command and go. Since maybe not everybody has that set up, we're going to do the HTTPS. So it looks more like a URL. And we're going to copy that. And I'm actually also going to put that into my sticky note so that it's easier to deal with. So I'm going to paste that in here. There we go. Okay. Now we can close this out. So we're going to go back to our RStudio server. And this is where we're going to be working more in the terminal. So you can see this is an R script, right? And then I have console, terminal, and background jobs. I want to be in terminal. So right now, this terminal is not looking in the right folder. It's looking at home/mmr125, which is my case ID. So we want to point it in the right direction. So the command to do that is just cd space, and then you want to put in your file path. So this is a folder where I have a lot of my work information stored. It's generally good practice if you're cloning something from Git, cloning a repo from Git, you want to put that into a folder called Git, just so you know where it is. And it's separate from all of your other stuff. So I made a Git folder here. And I want to copy this file path. So a shortcut in this RStudio server is that if you're in this files window, you can actually go to the little settings wheel and copy folder path to clipboard. I do that all the time. It's a lot easier than trying to type all of it. And we're gonna paste as plain text. You can see that's my folder path. So the little squiggle is the home MMR125, and then the rest of it's my file path. Hit enter. And now it is pointing at this Git folder. It's not actually looking at anything. It's not looking in here. It's just kind of pointing to it. So now that we've done that, we can copy our git clone command. So I'm just taking this out of a sticky note that I put on my computer. And we're going to paste that as plain text in here. Hit enter. And it is cloning into this new folder. So it's in the Git folder and it made this new folder for the repo, but now it's asking me for a password. So this is where you're going to paste in that app password, which I'm grabbing from a sticky note. And if you start to type anything in here, you won't actually see anything show up even when you paste that password in. So if you're pasting it and you're like, oh, why isn't it working? Make sure that you haven't added any extra spaces or characters when you're putting it in, and make sure you haven't pasted it multiple times, because otherwise, yeah, you won't be able to see it, but it won't work. So we're going to paste as plain text, hit enter. And we can see that it is now putting all of these files into this folder. If we open up this folder, everything that was in that repo is now here. So that is that, and you need to do that for every project that you're working on in order to get that remote repo into somewhere where you can actually work on it. Okay. So before we get coding, we need to make sure that our user branch is up to date with any changes that have happened in the main branch. So what we're going to do is kind of this step right here, where blue is the main branch and green is our user branch. So there are a list of commands that we can use to do this. So we want to first update our local main branch. So the main branch that is in your local repository, the one that's in that RStudio server. And we're going to use this git checkout main to make sure that we're in the main branch, and then git pull main pulls changes in the remote repo to your local repo. So we are going to go here. And before we actually do that, right now our file path is only in the Git folder. It's not in the folder for our repo. So we need to add that addition for the repo. So I'm going to cd into it. So cd And I don't need the full file path again. I should be able to just type in that like Antarctica penguins climate. And now we are looking in this folder. Okay. So what we want to do is make sure that we're in the main branch, which we are, and it says that we're up to date, but even so, we are going to git pull just to make sure. Oh, and we have to put in that app password again. If you are able to set up an SSH key, I highly recommend it because you do not have to do this you don't have to enter the password every single time. All right, there we go. So we're up to date, nothing to worry about, makes sense since we just cloned it. And then what we want to do is we need to merge the main branch into our user branch. So what that does is basically make sure that your user branch has everything that you need from the main branch, and it's also up to date. So we are going to git checkout and then the name of my branch. So that was Mira-MMR. And it has switched to my branch. And what we want to do is now git merge main. So we're merging main into my branch. So that's why the command is git merge main and not git merge Mira-MMR. And that's all up to date, which is what we expected. So that's good. So when we actually edit a file and then we go to add it to the repository, there are a couple of different areas that file actually exists. So your working directory, which in this nice graphic from Allison Horst, who's great data science and illustrator, is over here. And that's where we're actually adding and editing content. And then we need to use this git add command to add it to the staging area. And that's a temporary area where we see files that were changed and what changes were made. And then we need to send it to the local repo. So that's the local repository that is in your server or on your computer or whatever. That's where you're doing your work. And then we also want to push any updates, any files that are in our local repo to our remote repo. And that's the one that's hosted on Bitbucket. And that's where all of the content that gets uploaded is stored. So if we look at our graphic here, git add is the thing that adds copies of files that you edit in the working directory to your staging area. And if you use git add and then --all, it adds all of the files that you've touched. And then git commit is what saves these files to your local repo. So we can see here, little commit, little trucks moving from this warehouse kind of deal where you're working your working directory to your local repo. And when you do a git commit, you need to add a commit message, and it should be descriptive so that other developers can see a summary of the changes that you've made, and so that everybody is up to date with what everybody else is doing on the project. And then git push uploads whatever's in your local repo to your branch in the remote repo. So that's this little rowboat going up here. So we're gonna do some of that. So we're gonna go back to our RStudio server. I am in this folder right now, and what I want to do is make a new file. Okay, so let's say I'm gonna make a new R script. We're gonna say it's just penguins.r. Okay, and it's up here. And it's saved, and it showed up in my little, oh, it looks like I'd made this before. It showed up in my little folder over here. And now that that's set, let's say I do a whole bunch of work in here. Now I want to save my work. Okay. So I made this edit to my folder. And the first thing that I want to do, if we look back here, first thing I want to do is add that new file from my working directory to my staging area. So we're going to go in here and we're going to type git add. And then maybe I edited more than one file. So instead of using the specific file name, I want to add everything. So we're going to do git add all. Oh, that might not have been the right command. Let me double check. No, it should have done something. All right, so we can check whether it added it or not. So a good way to check is using this git status. That'll tell us the status of our files. So yeah, it did add it. It's green. It says I have my penguins R file right here. And it says changes to be committed. And it says that it's actually staged right now. So that's good. Let me hide. There we go. All right. So now that that's added, it's in our staging area. We can commit it to our local repo. So now I'm going to type git commit. And then -m is where you leave your message. So we're going to say adding new penguins script. There we go. So just a short summary of what I did. Enter. And it has that commit message. So it says one file changed, no insertions, no deletions. And now that's in my local repo. So now what we have to do, we go back here, is we need to upload whatever is in our local repo to our branch in the remote repo. So the way that we do that is using git push. So git push. And we need to enter that app password again. So I'm just grabbing that out of my sticky note. There we go. So it has pushed everything up into my branch. And if we look at my branch in this Bitbucket, it should have this new penguin script with it. That's great. So now that you've made your edits and updated your branch in the remote repo, we can now kind of merge the work that we've done with the main branch. So now that's this step here, kind of merging back the green, which is our branch, with the main branch. So what we want to do, there are actually a couple of different ways we can do this. So if you want to merge your user branch into the main branch in the terminal, you can use git checkout main, which moves to the main branch, and then git merge user merges the user branch into the main branch. So that's basically the opposite of what we did before. Doing it this way can cause a couple problems. So a merge conflict is what happens when the same lines of a file have been changed by two different developers. And in Bitbucket, you can use pull requests rather than merging directly to merge your branch into main and to prevent merge conflicts. So that's actually what we're going to do because it's a little more reliable. So back in Bitbucket, we're going to go to pull requests. And we can see there aren't any open ones right now. So we're going to create one. And yep, we want to merge my branch into main, and we can see that the title of it is actually my commit message. So that's really helpful. You can add more of a description if you want. But if we create this pull request, we can see what was changed. It was just this file that was added. I'm going to approve it and merge. And there we go. So that's all set. So when you want to get edits from your remote branch to your local repo, you use these two commands: git checkout to get into your branch, and then git pull pulls down copies of files from the remote repo to your local repo. So it's a pretty simple command. Nothing's going to change here because we just updated everything. But we're still in my branch, so we can do, if we wanted to, we could go git checkout main, move to the main branch. Whoops. Yeah, okay, there we go. So we're in the main branch. And then we want to get pull. So we want to get our updates from Bitbucket back down here. So I'm gonna git pull. We have to put in the app password again. It's really important to have that saved. There we go. All right. And now our main branch is up to date, and it actually updated the main branch on our local repo with the change that we made to the main branch on the remote repo, which was adding that file and merging our branch with main. So before you start working for every session that you're going to work on a project that other people are also working on, you want to make sure that everything is up to date. So you should basically follow this list of commands to do that. Basically, these two are updating your user branch with changes in your remote branch, and then updating the main branch with changes in the remote main branch, and then merging main into your user branch so that your user branch is fully up to date and pushing updates. So you should basically follow this step by step every time you're going to go work on a group project to avoid merge conflicts and make sure everything's okay. So again, you can use pull requests to avoid merge conflicts. It's easier to compare changes between your branch and main. And then you can also use git status to figure out whether your branch is up to date and which files you have are staged or untracked before you go to commit them. So this little graphic here shows the difference between like untracked and staged. So adding git add gets us to staged. And then there are also other statuses that these can have. So unmodified and modified. And when you commit it, it goes, it you know, puts itself where it belongs and everything's added and you have a message attached to that, and it should all work out. So here I have like brief glossary of git commands and then other just kind of jargon that goes with git and merging and what a pull request is and all of those things. And then here, this Atlassian Git tutorial page is really, really helpful. They have a lot more information, a lot more details on getting started and how to use Git when you're working collaboratively. And then a lot of my graphics came from Allison Horst, who is a great illustrator and does a lot for R graphics and data science in R. And that's it. Thanks.